What up, Ho Biscuits? It's your girl Skitten, back at it again. First and foremost, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are staying safe and sanitized. Y'all, I don't know exactly how many months it's been, but we finally freaking made it. We are finally here. This is the final installment of the Extra Credits, Extra History, Joan of Arc series. If you haven't seen the other 4 videos, make sure you go ahead and check those out. Some other extra credit series that I've done are Vlad the Impaler. Chavez and I both did the history of coffee, and right now we're making our way through the history of beer. So, you know, if history is your thing, there's plenty of content there for you. So make sure you go ahead and check out those videos. I'm really excited about this one. This is going to be my second completed series with them. So y'all know I'm really into it. I really like it. So this is Joan of Arc, Heroine, or Heretic. Like I said before, it's the 5th and final installment in the series. I am super excited to see what this video has in store for us. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
February 21st, 1431, Rouen Castle.
Rouen.
Do you swear to speak the truth in answer to such questions as are put to you? Asks Bishop Cauchon. I do not know what you wish to examine me on, responds Joan. Perhaps you might ask such things I would not tell. Will you swear to speak the truth upon those things which are asked of you concerning your faith, which you know? Concerning my father and mother, and what I've done since I took the road to France, I will gladly swear to tell the truth. But concerning my revelations from God, these I have never told or revealed to anyone, save only to Charles, my king, and I will not reveal them to save my head. It's the first day of Joan's inquisitional trial for heresy. She is both the defendant and the only witness, and she's arguing for her life. Joan survived the leap from the tower, landing on a soft patch of earth. But the fall had gone badly, and she laid injured until her jailers collected her, her voices whispering comfort. But her worry came to pass. The Burgundians sold her to the English, and there would be a trial for witchcraft and heresy conducted by her enemies. As they prepared, Joan languished in prison. English and Burgundian lords visited to Lirat and Groper. She was constantly alone with male soldiers. She still wore men's clothing, though, for it was a greater defense against assault than a dress. Outside her cell, the inquisitional trial was taking shape. At its head was Bishop Pierre Cauchon, a clergyman who'd been a long supporter of English interests in France. In fact, he'd personally negotiated Joan's sale to the English. So this trial was not exactly fair, because you see, after Joan got Charles crowned at Arras, the English, not to be outdone, had rushed their boy king, Henry VI, into the country in order to crown him King of France. But Charles was still claiming, through Joan, that God supported his claim. However, if Cauchon could prove in court that Joan was either a heretic, a witch, or a liar, it would go a long way toward undercutting Charles's claim to the throne.
And see, now where is Charles in all of this, okay? You got the top dog who is in your corner over there eating gruel and in shackles. Like, sir, I need you to step it up. I need you to do better.
It was a trial designed to discredit Joan and her visions. Yet Cauchon knew it couldn't be an obvious hit job. Everyone knew the English and Burgundians hated Joan and expected a slanted court. Therefore, the verdict must be unimpeachable. Cauchon insisted on following strict procedure, enlisting some of the finest theological minds in France to serve as examiners. Every questioning session, every move by the court, every piece of evidence would be recorded. He wanted everyone to know how they'd come to their conclusions. Yet his initial background investigation wasn't promising. An investigator sent to Doremy to dig up dirt came back empty-handed, and a group of English noblewomen confirmed Joan was a virgin, meaning she wasn't lying about being a maid.
Oh God, that concept is so dehumanizing when you think about the steps that they took to confirm that she was a virgin. Ugh. You know, when you look at history through the lens of, you know, the current times, it's awful, right? And people are like, oh, you can't blame. But like, even back then, they knew that that shit was fucked up. You know what I mean? Ugh, that's so annoying.
But that still left the charge of heresy, of harboring beliefs that differed from established church doctrine. And if Joan refused to recant, that was a death sentence. So the dance began. Joan insisted that they let her take mass. The prosecutor, for his part, insisted that she could not hear Mass while dressed as a man, and Joan countered that her garments protected her. Then the questioning portion of the trial opened, with Joan standing in a castle hall amid 50 or 60 churchmen. Now she had an audience. Joan began sparring with the court over her oath to be truthful. She agreed to answer questions about her past and her faith, but not her visions. It was an argument that would repeat every day. And over the next week and a half, the court would probe her about her past, her beliefs, and every step of her journey since leaving Dorami. They asked about whether she had disobeyed her parents by leaving, about obscure village folk beliefs, and of course, about her visions. Her examiners were learned men, versed in theology, and with decades of education in canon law. Joan, by contrast, was an illiterate peasant who had only recently learned to sign her name on the letters she dictated. Yet, she pushed back. Her voices told her to be bold, to argue, to challenge. And though not traditionally schooled, she had a sharp mind and had absorbed much in her years as a devoted Catholic.
She's not stupid.
On the third day, when the inquisitors asked her whether she believed she would go to heaven, the court held its breath. Because, yes, thank you, Admiral, it was a trap. If Joan said no, she would be admitting a state of sin. But if she said yes, she would contradict church doctrine that humans could not truly know whether they were in grace.
Because at the time, the belief was that it was predetermined who would go to heaven. So basically back then, no matter what you did, you could not guarantee yourself a spot in heaven. You could do your best. You could do, what you could do. And that is how they kept people in line, and, how they made it so that people obeyed the church, because, in the hopes that you would get to go to heaven. But there was no real way to do that. So, for me, I'd just be like, fuck it, we ball. But, that's me.
She would contradict church doctrine that humans could not truly know whether they were in grace. So either way, it would be an admission of heresy.
Blasphemy.
If I am not in his grace, she answered, may God put me there. And if I am, may God so keep me. I should be the saddest creature in the world if I knew I were not in his grace.
Right.
Her eloquence on the issues stunned the court.
Exactly.
Questions of faith, she batted away with ease that puzzled her questioners. And Joan reveled in this performance. But when speaking of visions, though, she evaded, circled, outright refused.
Because it's none of your business. It's none of your business.
This was wise, because she was not as well versed in church doctrine involving spiritual beings. And if she spoke about it, might unknowingly create an opening. For days, Kashaw and the inquisitors hammered at her. Who told you to wear men's clothing? Why did you do it, despite the fact the Old Testament forbids it? Name the voices. Convince us you've seen the saints. He urged Joan to describe her visions beyond seeing light and hearing voices. Was it the voice of God, saints, or angels? If saints, did they give her a sign to convince others that her visions were real? This, too, was a snare.
Yeah.
You see, church doctrine held that saints and angels were beings of pure spirit, and they had no corporeal bodies. So if Joan described seeing them in the flesh, you get where he was going.
It's a demon.
He took away her audience and began questioning her in private in her cell.
Because she's convincing the people that he's wrong.
The cracks began to show. She said the voices were the Archangel Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret.
Oh, God.
And that they appeared to her, solid as her inquisitors, and she knew them by the symbols they carried.
Girl, shut your mouth.
And when pressed, Joan described a vision she'd had at Charles's court, where an angel walked into the audience hall and placed a jeweled crown on the Dauphin's head. But she still refused to reveal exactly what she'd said to the Dauphin in private. And finally, Cauchon considered using torture.
Ooh.
And indeed, he showed Joan the implements, hoping the sight of these tools of pain would force a confession. But they did not.
Do what you gotta do, bruh.
Joan was already ill, and they did worry that if they tortured her, she might die in custody. So tabling torture, they drew up their findings and read them to her. 12 charges. She would need to answer them the next day. May 24th, 1431.
Okay.
Joan stands on a scaffold in a graveyard, formally charged with heresy.
That's fucked
The
up.
prosecutors had determined that either she had fabricated the visions, or they were demons. Then, a surprise. If she doesn't answer these charges, they say, they will execute sentence immediately. Joan's voices had promised that they'd deliver her from captivity, but now time was up. She gave in to fear and confessed.
No!
The inquisitors had not expected that, but they were delighted. After all, the best outcome of a heresy trial was one where the accused recanted and was welcomed back into the church.
Girl?
Joan would live, just in captivity. They shaved her head, put her in the dress she'd so resisted. But 2 days later, Cauchon got a message. He rushed to Joan's cell. She was back in men's clothes, agitated. One story said her guards had assaulted her. Another claimed they'd forced her into her old clothing. She babbled. Her voices were angry that she had recanted out of fear, and she worried God would turn her away. A confessed heretic could live, but one who returned to their sin must die.
Damn.
And so, the next day, they burned her in the old marketplace. One English soldier held a cross high so she could look at it as the flames consumed her.
Ooh.
And the executioner ensured that nothing was left.
Burning is such a barbaric form of execution. Queen Elizabeth I's sister, Queen Mary, used to burn heretics all the time, and they used to say like that the smell enveloped the city. Ugh. Oh God. For people who were supposed to be like civilized and, you know, shining in the light of God or whatever, they were so awful.
No bones the faithful could venerate. And finally, they threw her ashes into a river.
Now that's disrespectful.
Cauchon spread the transcripts across Europe to show they'd been right to convict her. King Charles reportedly swore vengeance for her death.
Because where were you? How are you gonna swear vengeance? Where were you? Where were your people?
But he made no public statements. In fact, he already had a new holy youth, a shepherd boy that showed the stigmata.
Oh, what a
In
whore.
time, the English killed him too. But if the English had hoped that Joan's death would change the course of the war, they were wrong. In 1449, 18 years after Joan's execution, Charles entered the English capital of Rouen in victory. The English were well on the way to being driven out of France. Where the father had been known as Charles the Beloved and Charles the Mad, the son would be known as Charles the Victorious. And part of that victory was to instigate a retrial, just as politically motivated as the first, that cleared Joan in 1453. Because in the 22 years since the first trial, politics had changed a great deal. With the Armagnac and Burgundian at peace, everyone was eager to rewrite history, recasting the war as one of French against English. And of course, Charles's continued success seemed to vindicate Joan's visions. Even people who had participated in the first trial emerged to denounce it as corrupted by politics. Joan was no longer a champion for the Armagnacs. This soldier from a bitter civil war was now seen as a champion of all of France. And her status as a national symbol would only grow over the centuries. And in 1920, the same church that had condemned Joan as a heretic officially declared her a saint.
Whack.
The girl who had defended Orléans, taken the Loire castles, and failed outside the walls of Paris, had made one final conquest. For now, she'd stormed the gates of heaven.
Joan of Arc deserved better. She deserved better. Everybody did her dirty. Well, that is a sad ending to a wonderful tale. I say wonderful tale like it's like some sort of fantasy, like she was like a real person. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the series. Don't forget to leave your reaction requests and recommendations down in the comments below. And other than that, peace out, ho biscuits. It's Skittenlit.